am trying to remember my name, my real name, the one my mother spoke when I was born, the one my father called me by before the palace gates swallowed me whole. I have been trying for 7 years now. It begins with a sound, a letter, something that might be right, but the harder I reach for it, the faster it dissolves, like salt in water, like blood in rain, like everything I used to be. This is what they took from me. Not just my body, though, they took that too, with surgical precision and imperial decree. Not just my future, though, that died on a marble table while I screamed myself voiceless. They took my name, myself, the fundamental certainty of who I was, and in its place, they gave me hers. Poppaea Sabina, empress of Rome, dead 4 months when I first walked into Nero's palace. Dead for 2,000 years by the time you hear this. But for 2 years, I was her. I wore her face, spoke with her voice, moved with her grace, lay in her bed beside an emperor who needed so desperately to believe that the dead could return. I became so good at being her that I forgot how to be myself. This is the cost. This is what it means when a god decides you will become his ghost. I am leaving this confession because it is the only thing I have left that is truly mine. Not my body that was remade, not my name that was erased, not my memories. Those have been so thoroughly overwritten that I can no longer tell which ones are real. Just this telling, this scar. If you are listening, you are holding the last piece of someone who no longer exists. The last proof that before I was her, I was someone else entirely. Guard it carefully. It is all that remains. Let me tell you how an emperor murders you without letting you die. The day was ordinary. Spring morning, Rome golden with new sun. The smell of bread baking in my neighbor's oven. I was 17. Beautiful in a way. I had not yet learned to fear. My mother knew before I did. She was folding laundry when we heard the footsteps. Heavy, synchronized, the unmistakable cadence of imperial guards. She looked up, looked at me, and the cloth fell from her hands. "No," she whispered. "Just that. No." But there is no "no" in a palace summons. There is only yes and yes. They were polite, almost apologetic. A sealed scroll with the emperor's seal, an armed escort, a closed cart, so no one would see who they were taking. My mother gripped my arm as they led me away. Her fingers dug into my flesh so hard I wore the bruises for a week, 5 perfect ovals of purple and yellow. By the time they faded, bruises were the least of what marked my skin. The palace swallowed me whole, marble and gold and incense so thick it coated your tongue. I was taken through corridors that seemed to fold back on themselves, each more opulent than the last, until opulence lost all meaning and became just another kind of prison wall. They brought me to a chamber that smelled of flowers and something underneath, something sweet and rotting at once. It had been hers, Poppaea's private rooms, sealed since her death, now reopened for a purpose I could not yet conceive. Men waited inside, freedmen in expensive robes, courtiers with calculating eyes, physicians with the faces of kindly uncles and the stillness of predators. And propped on a stand of carved ivory, her portrait, life-sized, painted with such skill that her eyes seemed to track me as I entered. She was beautiful. Of course she was. The most beautiful woman in Rome, they had said. The face that had captivated an emperor, toppled a wife, changed the succession. Dead now, 4 months in her tomb, but more alive in that room than I was. They positioned me beside the portrait. No one spoke. They simply looked, back and forth. Her, me, her, me. Then, the physician, Greek, I could tell from his accent, stepped forward. He reached out and touched my face. Not gently, not cruelly, clinically. A sculptor appraising marble, he traced my cheekbone with one finger, then reached up and traced the same line in the painting. He smiled. "Remarkable," he said softly. "The gods themselves prepared this one." He turned to the chief freedman, nodded once, And in that nod, my life ended. I did not understand yet, not fully. The human mind has limits. It cannot conceive of certain horrors until they are already happening, already done, already irreversible. They measured me like cloth for tailoring, the distance between my eyes a thumb's width. Match. The angle of my cheekbones, nearly identical. Acceptable. The curve of my jaw close, very close, workable. The fullness of my lips, the arch of my brows, the set of my ears, the length of my throat, the width of my shoulders, the span of my hips. Every part of me catalogued, compared, judged against a dead woman's dimensions. The hair will need extensions. The skin is too sun-touched, but that can be corrected. The voice will require training. And the body? This from the chief freedman. The body, the physician said slowly, will require modification, but it can be done. The resemblance is strong enough, that, with proper adjustments. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time as a person rather than material. Yes, he said, we can work with this one. The emperor will have his Poppaea. That was when I understood. Understanding came like ice water, like falling, like drowning in warm honey. They were going to make me her, not dress me as her, not teach me to imitate her, remake me, reshape my body into hers, turn me into a resurrection. No, my voice came out smaller than I wanted. No, please, I am not, I cannot. You are honored, the chief freedman said, not unkindly, just stating fact. The emperor has chosen you. You will be empress. I am not a woman. I am not her. I am. But what was I? A name they did not care about. A family with no power. A future that meant nothing against imperial will. I was clay. I was material. I was a solution to an emperor's grief. I was already gone. They brought me before Nero that evening. He sat on a couch draped in Tyrian purple, the most expensive dye in the empire, reserved for emperors, worth more than most men's lives. His body had gone soft with excess, but his eyes were hard and red-rimmed and desperate. He was 27, an age when most men are still finding themselves. But Nero had been emperor since 16. He had never been allowed to find himself, only to create himself over and over, each version more grandiose and more fragile, like a tower built of gold leaf and delusion. He looked at me for a long time. I stood where they had placed me, trembling, trying not to weep, trying to understand how this was happening, how the morning had been ordinary and now everything was ending. Nero stood, walked toward me. I could smell wine on his breath, saffron oil in his hair, something else underneath grief, maybe, or madness, or the particular scent of a man who has had too much power for too long. He reached out with shaking fingers and touched my cheek. Poppaea, he whispered. Caesar, I am not. His hand covered my mouth, gentle, silencing. Poppaea, he said again, firmer. His thumb traced my jaw, tilting my face into the lamplight, studying me like a painting, like a memory, like a prayer that might be answered. Tears spilled down his cheeks. Yes, he breathed. Yes, the gods have sent her back to me. I knew they would. I knew if I was faithful, if I grieved properly, He was weeping in earnest now, smiling and weeping at once, the tears cutting tracks through the powder on his face. He turned to the physicians without releasing my face. Perfect, he said. Begin tonight. Tonight, Caesar. We should prepare. Tonight. I will not wait another day. She has been gone too long already. His eyes found mine again, and in them I saw no recognition of me, no acknowledgement that I was a person, separate, real, with my own name and life and right to exist. He saw only her, only what he needed me to be. We will be married as soon as you are ready, my love, he said softly. As soon as you are complete. I tried to run. It was instinct, animal panic. I twisted out of his grip and bolted for the door. I made it 3 steps. The guards caught me. Of course they did. Where did I think I would go? Every corridor in the palace led back to this moment. Every door opened into the same ending. I fought anyway, screamed, begged, clawed at them like a trapped animal. Nero watched with that same soft, distant expression. Gently, he said to the guards, "Do not mark her. She must be perfect." They carried me from his presence while I screamed. The last thing I heard was Nero's voice, calling after me, "Do not fear, my love. Soon you will understand. Soon you will be yourself again." But I would never be myself again. That was the point. The chamber they took me to had been prepared. I realized that later. This was not improvisation. They had known, had planned, had readied everything before I ever walked through the palace gates. The table was marble, cold even in the warm spring evening. The instruments were laid out in neat rows, gleaming in lamplight. The Greek physician was already there, washing his hands in a silver basin. He looked up as they brought me in, still struggling, and smiled that same calm smile. Put him on the table, restrain the wrists and ankles, yes, like that, tight enough that he cannot damage himself. Please, I was begging now, all pride abandoned. Please, I will do anything else. I will serve the emperor. You will serve the emperor, the physician agreed. He dried his hands carefully. In the most important way possible, you will return his beloved to him. You will heal his grief. You will give him back what death took. I am not her. I cannot. Not yet, he said gently. He leaned over me, and his face was so kind. That was the worst part. His face was so terribly kind. You can scream, he told me. No one will mind. The chamber is far from the residential wings. And truly, it is better if you scream. Better than holding it inside. He picked up the first instrument. I will not tell you what they did. Not in detail. Not step by step. Some acts are too obscene for language. Some pain exists beyond the possibility of description. I can tell you this. They were efficient. The empire runs on such cruelties. Castrati serving in wealthy households. Pleasure slaves in the right establishments. Boys remade to suit particular tastes. This was not new. Not rare. Just another Tuesday in Rome. But this was different in scale, in purpose, in the sheer weight of imperial obsession behind it. This was not about creating a servant. This was resurrection. This was forcing the dead to walk again, to breathe again, to warm an emperor's bed again. The pain when it came was absolute, total, the kind of pain that whites out the world, that erases thought, that reduces you to a single point of screaming nerves. I screamed until my voice broke, until I tasted blood, until the screaming became silent. Just my mouth open and no sound emerging, just the endless white howl inside my skull. They kept me conscious. That was important, the physician explained in that same gentle voice. Something about the healing, about the wounds needing to be properly packed while fresh. I begged them to stop, to kill me, to let me die. This is the emperor's will, the physician said, stroking my hair while his assistant worked below. You should be honored. You will be empress. You will have power and luxury beyond imagination. I don't want. What you want is no longer relevant. What you were is no longer relevant. There is only what you will become. Said. He was right. I learned that in the days that followed, or weeks, I could not tell. Time stopped meaning anything. There was only pain and fever and delirium, where I could not distinguish between screaming and silence, between waking and nightmare. There were moments I surfaced enough to understand what had been done, what I had lost, what I would never have. The children I would never father, the man I would never become, the life that had been waiting for me, modest and ordinary in mine, now impossible, all of it gone, cut away, discarded like waste. And then the poppy milk would come again, sweet and bitter on my tongue, and I would sink back into darkness. When I finally surfaced, truly surfaced, mind clear and body past the worst of the healing, I found myself in a different world. Soft sheets, Sunlight through silk curtains, the sound of fountains, the scent of flowers, and women. So many women, moving around me with purpose and something in their eyes I would learn to recognize. Pity mixed with duty, mixed with relief that it was me and not them. One sat beside my bed, gray-haired, beautiful once. You could see it in the bones of her face. She wore the stola of a freedwoman, expensive fabric but simple cut. "I am Acti," she said quietly. "I will help you learn." "Learn what?" My voice came out ruined, hoarse from screaming. "To be her." She gestured to the other women, the cosmetics and jewelry and silk laid out like surgical instruments. "To be Poppaea Sabina. To be the woman the Emperor loves." "I am not." "No," she agreed. "You are not. Not yet. But you will be." She had been Nero's mistress once, I learned later. Years before Poppaea, she had loved him, perhaps, or loved the idea of him, and he had discarded her when something more beautiful came along. Now, she served a darker purpose, teaching a dead woman's replacement how to become convincing. The irony was not lost on either of us. "I knew your father," she said suddenly, quietly. "Years ago, he was a good man." I stared at her. This was dangerous, acknowledging who I had been, who I was. "I am sorry," she said, "for what is happening to you, for what has already happened. But I will make it easier if I can. I will teach you how to survive this." "I don't want to survive this. I want what you want no longer matters, only what you will become. So let me teach you how to become it well, how to make the cage bearable." She was right. Of course she was right. So I learned. They started with the surface. My body was healing, still tender, still wrong, still feeling like a stranger's flesh. But the surface could be transformed while the deeper wounds closed. Oil rubbed into my skin every morning and evening, scented with myrrh and rose and something else, some rare Eastern import that Poppaea had favored. The smell made me nauseous at first, then familiar, then comforting. That was when I knew I was lost. My hair had been short, the way young men wore it. They could not wait for it to grow. Extensions were woven in, real human hair in her shade of auburn gold. It took hours. My scalp ached for days, but when they finished, I had her hair, makeup applied with an artist's precision, kohl to reshape my eyes, powder to lighten my sun-touched skin. I had been alive, once, had walked under the Sunday. She had been pale, protected, precious, red stain for my lips, rouge for my cheeks. 2 hours every morning transforming my face into hers. And jewelry, gods, the jewelry, they pierced my ears. I remember that small violence among the larger ones, how absurd it seemed to flinch at a needle after what I had endured. Earrings of gold and pearl that pulled at my lobes, necklaces heavy as chains, bracelets that chimed when I moved, and one ring in particular, an emerald, the size of a quail's egg, set in gold worked so fine it seemed almost liquid. It had been her favorite, they told me. She wore it every day. They slid it onto my finger. It was too large. My hands were smaller than hers. The ring slipped, turned, nearly fell off. "We will have it resized," Acti said. "No," said the chief freedman who had supervised my selection. "Leave it. The Emperor will want to see it as it was, as she wore it." So, I learned to hold my hand carefully, to keep the ring from sliding, to feel its weight as a constant reminder of whose place I was filling. I wear that sensation still. 7 years gone, the ring lost or stolen or buried somewhere, and I can still feel it sliding on my finger, too large, never quite fitting. Some ghosts are made of gold, but the body was just the beginning. The real work was deeper. They taught me to walk like her. Poppaea had moved with particular grace, they said, a slight sway to her hips, head held high but not arrogantly. The awareness of being watched and the pleasure taken in that watching. I practiced for hours each day, walking the length of the chamber while women who had served her watched and corrected. Smaller steps. She was conscious of her dignity. Soften your shoulders. You move like a soldier. She was water, not stone. Again, you are thinking too much. She did not think. She simply was. That was the key, I learned. Not to imitate, to become, to stop thinking about the performance and let it sink into muscle memory, into reflex, into the unconscious truth of how I moved through the world. When you stop thinking about it, that is when you forget how you used to move. They taught me her voice, not just the pitch higher than my natural register, with a slight rasp from an illness she had as a child, but her patterns of speech. The way she paused before answering, letting the moment ripen, the way she laughed, musical and warm but with an edge of knowing, the way she could praise and criticize in the same breath, so subtly that you heard only what you wanted to hear. The Emperor's verses show such ambition, Acta demonstrated. See, he hears praise. But you have told the truth. I repeated it, again, until her cadence lived in my throat, and I could not remember how my own voice sounded. They taught me her preferences. White roses, always white. No peacock feathers in her chamber's bad luck. Purple was forbidden on the Collins. She prayed to Venus every morning and Isis every evening. She loved theater but pretended to find it frivolous. She could discuss philosophy but preferred not to. She ate sparingly in public and voraciously in private. 1,000 small details that had made her a person, all catalogued, all transferred to me like cargo loaded onto a ship, and slowly, horribly, I began to forget my own. I began to forget how I had walked before they taught me to sway, how my voice had sounded before they trained me to rasp, what I had liked, what I had wanted, what had made me myself. There was no time for remembering. Every hour was spent learning to be her, and you cannot hold two complete identities in one mind. Eventually, one gives way. I felt it happening, felt myself dissolving like salt in water, and I could not stop it. This is how they kill you without letting you die. They fill you so completely with someone else that there is no room left for you. 3 months after I entered the palace, they brought me to a mirror, full length, polished bronze, expensive enough to buy a small villa, worth more than my father earned in his lifetime. They had not let me see my full reflection until now, only fragments, a hand being painted, an eye being lined with kohl. Never the whole. They positioned me before it. Look, Acti said. I looked. Poppaea Sabina looked back. It was perfect, uncanny, impossible. Every detail exact right. The hair, the face, the body beneath the silk stola, the way I stood, the tilt of my head, the expression in my eyes. I had become her, not an imitation. Her, risen from the dead, exactly as she had been. I searched the reflection for some trace of who I had been, some hint of the boy who had walked into this palace 3 months ago, but he was gone, erased so completely that even I could not find him. You are ready, Acti said, and I heard something break in her voice. Grief, maybe, or shame at what she had helped create. I tried to speak, to say something, anything, but when I opened my mouth, her voice came out, not mine, hers. Even my voice belonged to her now. The wedding was spectacle. Everything Nero did was spectacle. I was dressed in saffron silk, the traditional bridal color, flowers woven into my hair, white roses, her favorite, the emerald ring on my finger, still too large, sliding when I moved. They led me through Rome in procession. Thousands lined the streets. The entire city had turned out, whether from curiosity or command, or the sick fascination of watching something that should not exist. They stared. Of course they stared. Some looked confused, tilting their heads as though their eyes were deceiving them. Some looked horrified, mouths falling open before they remembered where they were and composed their faces. But most simply cheered, because what else do you do when your emperor marries a ghost? when he parades a dead woman through the streets, resurrected in someone else's flesh, and demands you celebrate, you cheer, you throw flowers, you call out blessings. And if you know the truth, if you remember that 4 months ago Poppaea Sabina was buried, and the creature in bridal silk is something else entirely, you keep that knowledge locked behind your teeth. Because there are things more dangerous than lying to an emperor. Like telling him the truth, Nero stood waiting at the altar, purple and gold that cost more than entire provinces generated in taxes. His face was radiant, transported, the look of a man seeing a miracle. He looked at me and saw her, only her, never me. I understood in that moment that my survival depended on maintaining that illusion, on never letting him see the boy underneath, on being her so completely that even I forgot I was not. The priest spoke the words, I spoke the responses. In her voice, with her exact inflection and cadence, the crowd roared approval. And just like that, I became the bride of an emperor, the empress of Rome, the most powerful woman in the world. Except I was not a woman. I was not Poppaea. I was not even myself. I was something new, something that should not exist. A living lie that an empire agreed to believe because the alternative was too terrible. The wedding night, I will not describe it in detail. Some things are too intimate, too obscene. I will tell you only this. Nero was gentle, terrifyingly gentle. He undressed me as though I might shatter. He touched me like I was precious, holy, a gift from the gods themselves. He wept her name into my hair, and I held him and whispered comfort in her voice and felt something inside me crack that would never heal. Because this was not rape, not in the simple way. This was something worse. This was being forced to participate so perfectly in someone else's delusion that the delusion became real. That the line between performance and reality dissolved entirely. This was discovering that you could be violated without violence. That the cruelest destructions are the ones that look like love. When it was over, Nero fell asleep with his head on my chest, one hand tangled in my hair, her hair, the extensions that were not mine. And I lay awake in the imperial bedchamber, staring at the ceiling painted with gods and heroes, and tried to remember my name. My real name. It would not come. For 2 years, I lived in a palace of marble and gold. I had everything, luxury beyond imagination, servants to anticipate my every need, food that was art before it was sustenance, silk and jewels and power by proximity to the Sunday. And I had nothing, no name, no body that was mine, no moment when I was not performing, no door that led to freedom. Nero was complicated. I wish I could tell you he was simply a monster. That would be easier, cleaner. It would let me be simply a victim. But he was human, broken and monstrous and desperately, achingly human. There were nights he wept for her, for the real Poppaea, the one who was dead and gone. He would clutch me and sob her name, and I understood that he knew. Some part of him knew I was not her. But he needed the lie more than he needed the truth. I held him in those moments. What else could I do? There were nights he raged at me for not being her, for being too tall or too short, or laughing wrong or failing to appreciate his poetry with sufficient enthusiasm. She understood, he would say. She knew what I was trying to create. You are just. You are just. He never finished, never named what I actually was. Once he hit me. Backhanded, hard enough that I tasted blood. Then he wept and begged forgiveness and covered me in gifts. The gifts were just another kind of chain. But there were other nights, rare ones, when he seemed almost to see me. We were in the garden once, late, no attendance, a rare gift of privacy. Nero was quiet, staring at stars. Do you hate me? He asked suddenly. I froze. This was forbidden territory. Caesar, I, not as her, as you. He turned to me, and his eyes were clear, almost sober. Do you hate me for what I have done to you? For one suspended breath, I could have told the truth. I could have said, yes, I hate you. I hate what you have made me. I hate every breath I take in this body. I hate that I cannot remember my own name. I hate that when I close my eyes, I see her face instead of mine. I hate you so much it has become the only thing I am certain of. But survival has its own wisdom. I am grateful for the honor you have shown me, Caesar. Her voice. Always her voice. Something died in his eyes. Of course, he said. Of course you are. By morning, he looked at me and saw only Poppaea again, and I understood that he did not want the truth. He wanted the beautiful lie, so I gave it to him, perfectly performed, until I could no longer tell where the performance ended. The court was vipers, senators who bowed low and hid their contempt, freedmen who saw opportunity in proximity to power, courtiers who treated me as Poppaea reborn or as an abomination. Depending on what served them, I learned to navigate them, learned to be decorative and pliant and non-threatening. But some saw opportunity. Perhaps the empress might mention to Caesar. They would murmur, sliding their requests forward like offerings. I refused at first. I wanted no part in their schemes. But neutrality was dangerous. Those I did not help became enemies. Those I did not harm grew suspicious of why I had been spared. So I began to play the game, a word against a senator who had called me creature, where I could hear. He was reassigned, far from Rome, from family, a favor for a courtier who had shown genuine kindness. Small interventions, barely noticeable, but I felt the power, even borrowed, even second-hand, even the power of being an emperor's obsession. It was intoxicating. People feared me, and I used that fear. Was I still a victim when I had a man's career destroyed? When I whispered poison in imperial ears? I told myself it was survival, just making the cage bearable. But was it? There was one person who saw me, a servant, young, my age, or what my age had been before time stopped meaning anything, assigned to attend my chambers. His name was Marcus. Unremarkable name, unremarkable face. The kind of person who moved through the palace invisible, but he had kind eyes. And once, when we were alone, when no one else could hear, he called me Dominus, my lord, the masculine form, a tiny rebellion, a small acknowledgement of truth. I met his eyes in the mirror, searching for mockery, for trap, but I saw only humanity, one prisoner recognizing another. Shall I draw your bath, Dominus? He asked quietly. Yes, I whispered. Thank you. He became my anchor. The only person in the palace who remembered I existed underneath. We did not speak of it often. Too dangerous. But in small moments, a steadying hand when the jewelry made me sway, a look of understanding, I felt seen. I felt human. It lasted 3 months. One morning, Marcus did not come. Another servant appeared. Where is Marcus? Reassigned, my lady. My blood went cold. Where? I could not say, my lady. I made careful inquiries, learned he had been sold to a mining operation in Hispania. A death sentence. No one survived the mines. I tried to intervene. Went to Nero that night, but he was paranoid, suspicious. Why do you care about a slave? His eyes narrowed. Why do you even know his name? I backtracked, made excuses. But the damage was done. You are too familiar with the servants, Nero said. It is beneath you, beneath her. She knew her place. I never asked about Marcus again, and I learned the lesson. Care for nothing, attached to no one. Every connection is leverage. Every kindness is danger. After that, I wore the mask perfectly. I became exactly what they wanted. Beautiful, pliant, empty. And inside, where no one could see, I screamed. The empire began to crack. Rebellions in the provinces, the Senate withdrawing support, legions declaring for other men. Nero felt it slipping. In his lucid moments, he understood. In his madness, he blamed everyone but himself. I watched from my gilded cage, held him when he wept, whispered that the gods still favored him, enabled his delusion to the very end. When the Praetorian Guard turned, when the Senate declared him an enemy of the state, Nero ran. He took me with him, Could not leave Poppaea behind again. We fled to a villa outside the city, a handful of loyal freedmen, and the sound of hoofbeats getting closer. I will never forget those final hours. Nero on the floor, the Emperor of Rome on the floor, shaking. "They will torture me," he whispered. "Drag me through the streets." He had a blade, could not bring himself to use it. He looked at me, and for the first time in 2 years, I saw recognition, not Poppaea, me. "You know what they will do to you," he said quietly. "After, they will use you as proof of my madness." I said nothing. It was true. "I am sorry." His voice cracked. "I am sorry for what I have done. I only wanted, I needed." Tears cut tracks through the powder on his face. "Will you forgive me?" I knelt beside him, this man who had destroyed me, who had stolen everything, who was now begging for comfort. I took his hand. "I forgive you." It was a lie, but it was the last kindness either of us had left. He smiled, grateful, then pressed the blade to his throat. His hands shook too badly. One of his freedmen guided it home. The blood came in arterial pulses. Nero looked shocked, surprised that it had come to this. His eyes found mine, held them, then went empty. I sat in the spreading blood, still holding his hand, feeling nothing. Not relief, not grief, just emptiness. After a long moment, I stood, removed the emerald ring too large, always sliding, set it on his chest. "Goodbye, Poppaea," I whispered, then walked into the dawn. The soldiers barely noticed me. Just another servant. For the first time in 2 years, invisibility was freedom. I was passed from emperor to emperor after that. Otho, Vitellius, each inheriting Nero's strangest legacy. I was paraded at banquets. A curiosity, proof of the previous regime's madness. They made me dance once. I did not know how, but I tried. They laughed. I smiled. What else could I do? Freedom came eventually. I will not tell you how. Some endings are too dark. But when I was finally free to be myself, I discovered something worse than any cage. I did not know who myself was. The boy with my original name was gone. Every gesture, every habit, every unconscious movement erased. Poppaea was gone too, dead and buried, and I was caught between. A ghost of a ghost. I tried to remember my name. It would not come. I walk through Rome now, anonymous. No silk, no jewels, no emerald ring. I see young men the age I was, beautiful in that dangerous way. I want to warn them, but they would not believe. Sometimes I catch my reflection, and I do not know whose face I see. I have learned to live with uncertainty, with being neither one thing nor another. Just this thing that survived. I am trying to remember my name. I have been trying for 7 years. It begins with a sound, a letter, something that might be right, but the harder I reach, the faster it dissolves. This is what they took from me. Not just my body, not just my future, my name, myself, the fundamental certainty of who I was. If you could choose die as yourself, or live as someone else's dream, which would you take? I thought I knew once. Now I know only this. I survived longer than Nero, longer than his golden house, longer than the empire's patience with madness. But I am not certain what survived was me. Remember this. If you remember anything, empires are built on such erasures. Every stone was set by hands that had their own names, their own stolen futures. I existed, not as Poppaea, not as Sporus, not as any name history will preserve, but as myself, whoever that was. This telling is mine, the only thing that was ever truly mine. The empire forgets, but I remember, and now, so do you.